Welcome back to Power and Politics. After a controversial year-and-a-half-long delay, outspoken former British MP George Galloway is here in Canada as we speak. Mr. Galloway is in Canada as part of his cross-country speaking tour. It's called Free Palestine, Free Afghanistan, Free Speech. Now remember, he was barred from entering Canada in March of last year. Why was George Galloway considered such a threat? Let me show you the hot sheet on him. The former Labour Party MP was thrown out of caucus back in 2003 for his opposition to the Iraq War. In 2005, he regained his seat as an MP for the Respect Party. In March of 2009, he was banned from Canada following claims he offered financial support to Hamas, and that's a terrorist group according to Canada, and called a threat to national security. Last September, a federal court dismissed the case, saying the government acted politically to suppress his opinions. Right now, George Galloway is gearing up for a sold-out speech tonight at York University in Toronto. Was the ban against him an attack on free speech in Canada, spearheaded by the Minister of Immigration, Jason Kenney? Are his political views so dangerous that they should be suppressed? And what does he actually think we should do, as he'll speak about tonight, about the war in Afghanistan? Joining me now is George Galloway. Mr. Galloway, thanks for being here.
Welcome.
Your tour, once banned, now on, is called Free Palestine, Free Afghanistan, Free Speech. Give us an idea. Obviously, you tried to come to Canada before. You weren't allowed, and now you're back. What will you be talking about?
Well, as I was saying before I was rudely interrupted 18 months ago, I'll be talking about the foreign policy of Canada, how I believe that it's not helpful to the conflicts in the world and certainly not helpful to the interests of Canada. Inevitably, we'll spend a fair bit of time talking about the fact that I was rudely interrupted on a wholly fictitious basis, an abusive process by the Government of Canada, which they were judicially caned for in a 60-page judgment, which is why I'm back here now. But the much more important issues, of course, are the war in Afghanistan and the war which is, I'm afraid, getting ready to break out in the Middle East, and the things we need to do to try to bring the first to an end and avoid the second.
All right, let's deal with a couple of issues. First, let's deal with your personal situation, and I want to come back to Afghanistan and the Palestine-Israel situation. First, you know Jason Kenney, the Minister of Immigration, didn't want you here. And some people have said, Bernie Farber, the CEO of the Canadian Jewish Congress, have said, look, you're welcome to come to Canada if you don't break Canadian laws. And one of the laws is you cannot support what Canada deems a terrorist group, which is Hamas. They have said you've supported them and that you may, in fact, be coming to Canada to raise money for support for that group. Will you be raising money to support Hamas?
No, and I never have, and Mr. Faber knows very well that all of that is fiction. I'm not a supporter of Hamas. I've never been a supporter of Hamas. I've never fundraised for Hamas, and I'm not fundraising for anybody on this trip, and neither would I have been if I'd been here 18 months ago. But what I have fundraised for in the past is to bring relief to the people who are suffering in Gaza now for 4 years, to punish them and their parents for how they voted in a free and fair election. The only free and fair election there's ever been in any Arab country, ever. And that's just immoral, to starve people's children, to punish them because their parents voted a way we didn't like. I didn't like. I was disappointed that Hamas won the election, but they did win it. All I say is that we have to talk to Hamas, and I've got news for the Canadian people if they didn't already know it. We already are. The British already are. The Americans already are. And the day will come, and pretty soon, much sooner perhaps than people think, when everyone will be talking to Hamas, because as we found in the north of Ireland, you can't possibly bring conflict to an end without talking to the people who are engaged in the conflict. And that's precisely, of course, what we're now doing in Afghanistan. Not before time, you might say, 10 years on.
You know, the foreign minister of Egypt has said George Galloway is considered persona non grata. You're not allowed to go through Egypt to get to Gaza. You've said that you would give your goods to the leadership of Hamas because they're democratically elected. So is that does that qualify as dealing with Hamas or supporting Hamas?
Well, that's
if you're giving them their supplies, that's the question here.
Well, it would depend what the supplies were, wouldn't it? If you're giving somebody ambulances and wheelchairs and medicine and children's milk and teddy bears and so on, it's bankrupting the word terrorism of its meaning in the language to describe such a thing as terrorism. Moreover, every NGO in the world, including Canada, has to deal with the political power that is in Gaza, has to deal with the Minister of Health in Gaza, for example, who is a member of Hamas. That's because they won the election there. So, I mean, it's all throwing sand in the eyes, Evan. I mean, it's all an attempt to confuse and divert attention from the real issue, which is that 1.6 million people have been starving in a siege which is illegal and which is condemned by all international organizations, all levels of the United Nations, virtually all governments in the world, with the notable exception of Mr. Harper's government here. And it's an attempt to divert attention from the need urgently to bring that siege to an end, not least because it's all based on punishing people because of how they voted.
Yeah, I mean, and that is certainly one of the idea of collective punishment versus tagging Hamas as a terrorist organization. Let me ask you a question. Do you agree that Canada calls Hamas a terrorist organization? Would George Galloway call them a terrorist organization?
No, which is not to say that they haven't committed terrorist acts. Just like the African National Congress, when it was led by Nelson Mandela, could not be described as a terrorist organization, though apartheid and its supporters in the world, maybe even here, did call the ANC a terrorist organization, but it was clearly not, which is not to say that they had not ever committed terrorist acts. They had. But to just put a full stop after the reference to terrorism misses the point. In any case, a settlement in South Africa required negotiation with the African National Congress.
But is that a parallel between Ireland or South Africa when you've got Fatah in the West Bank and Hamas in Gaza? There's clearly two kinds of leadership going on. Clearly, the West and Israel are ready to negotiate with one side, Fatah, but not the other, Hamas, for the simple reason that Hamas has a charter that says they don't have any desire to make peace with Israel.
Well, so does the PLO, which I've supported all my life. I am a supporter of Fatah. And believe me, I could show you my scars of the decades I spent urging people to talk to Fatah and their leader Yasser Arafat and being told that they would not do so because they were terrorists. So this is a movable feast. That's my point. This is a snapshot in time. When I negotiated as a member of Parliament with leaders of Sinn Féin in the north of Ireland, newspapers like The Sun denounced me as a terrorist. But now, Gerry Adams and Martin McGuinness are in and out of the White House as fast as you can say Jack Robinson, and that's the way things are in politics. But
it is true, but you have been, I mean, look, you're not without controversy. You've been at the side of Saddam Hussein. You've been at the side of Tariq Aziz, who's now under a death penalty in Iraq. You've been associated with some figures here that do not have a very good human rights record, George Galloway.
Well, there are lots of people, of course, who don't have a very good human rights record. One of them, down the road, George W. Bush, has just published a memoir boasting about it. I believe that you have to deal with the people who are in government in any particular theatre at any particular time, because I believe that that's how international relations operate. Tariq Aziz, I'm happy to talk to you about. As a Roman Catholic myself, I was very proud of the fact that he was the only Christian politician in any position of power in any Arab country. Arab countries nearby, you get sent to prison, maybe even get lashed in public for going to Mass. But a Roman Catholic was the deputy leader of Iraq. Look, we've
during
just been
during
in
a
China.
Time of mass human rights abuses, though. You admitted.
Well, this is the point I'm making to you, that David Cameron just led a huge delegation to China and was, some might say, extremely nice to the Chinese leadership, all in the interests of doing business, and all in the interests of doing business not just of a commercial nature but a political nature. The power in China is the Communist Party of China. So when you meet the leader of the Communist Party of China, you really have to call him sir. You really have to call him Mr. President. There isn't any other way you can conduct international relations.
George Galloway, I want to get your view on a couple of things. We know NATO is holding a summit in Lisbon in Portugal that will be a part of the ongoing for the mission in Afghanistan. Canada now is saying it will continue post-2011 in a training non-combat role in Afghanistan towards 2014. You've opposed these wars. What's your view on this?
Well, of course, it's purely a Canadian matter, whether or not you extend your mission or not. It's not really my business. But I just wonder if the Canadian people ever ask themselves, how come these Afghans need so much training? It's 10 years they've been being trained. Nobody's training the Taliban, and they seem to be doing pretty well on the battlefield. And I wonder if they ever ask themselves if this rubric training is a bit of a cover for something else, a bit of a cover for continuing to have one foot in the maw of that battlefield. And I think that's a very big mistake for my own country. It follows that I think it's a mistake for yours. I don't think that you'll be out by the time that you said you'll be out, and you've now postponed it 3 times. And I don't believe that your soldiers will be safe, because I don't think anybody's safe in Afghanistan. It would be better by far, instead of sending more and more soldiers, whether you call them trainers or fighters, to actually negotiate the terms of a withdrawal from Afghanistan. And those terms are available. They're the same terms that have always been available, and they are the terms that we will eventually leave Afghanistan under.
All right, 2 real quick things. Will you take your speaking tour to Calgary, to Jason Kenney's office? You famously challenged him to a 5-round boxing match and or a debate. Will you be going to Jason Kenney, the minister who refused to let you in originally?
Yes, because I'll tell you why. Not because I want to interfere in internal politics in Canada. I don't. But he hasn't accounted for the fact that he said several things in public that the court found to be untrue. And he behaved in a way which misled the Canadian people and Parliament, in a way which, I must tell you, in most democracies in the world, no minister would have survived with their portfolio intact following a judicial caning like the one he got from Justice Mosley.
Will you sue? Are you thinking of a lawsuit, George Galloway?
Yes, my lawyers here, Barbara Jackman, and her colleagues are working on a series of different areas where I think Canadian law has been breached.